Hey, welcome again to the Musicians Talk Show. I'm Matt Tolley.
That's right, and I am Dallas DeWhite. Welcome to episode 3. We have there's no other word for it, a wonderful interview for you guys today. Mr. Gary Gray, producer in Los Angeles. Man, this guy is a treasure trove of information.
Really insightful.
And he goes deep. We go deep. So before we get started, that intro that you just heard was produced by none other than him. So we wrote the theme, and it's our normal theme. However, we send it to guests, and they put their little spin on it, and then we air it with their episode. So that explains the slight difference in themes. So go, Gary. We love it. We hope you guys love it, too. Without further ado, let's get started. What's been going on since we talked last?
The answer is a lot. Where do you want me to start? From the most recent?
Start from wherever you want to start, man. I'm just excited to hear. You're always up to cool stuff.
Well, all right, let's start from the latest. I just landed my latest client, which is 20th Century Fox.
It's a pretty good client to have, I would say.
Yeah. And, it was one of those breaks that you, like overnight breaks that take 5 years of the night. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting because I got a telephone call out of nowhere, and they said, "Is this Gary Gray?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, this is licensing department at 20th Century Fox, and we've been referred to you by one of your clients, the head of licensing at the Disney Music Group." And this was just before Christmas, and Christmas season is usually a very slow season for us in the music industry.
Right.
So it was definitely a good timing because they gave me they asked me to come down to the 20th Century Fox backlot, which was cool for an interview. And so I got to see, where they do, the Simpsons and the Star Wars and all the 20th Century Fox stuff. And I was right next to the big sound stage where they have their 101-piece orchestras for all their film score soundtracks.
Yeah. Man, that must have been incredible.
Yeah, it was. And we met in their offices, and they interviewed me. And so they said, "Okay, this is cool. We're going to give you some production work to do, some mixing and mastering, orchestration." And I said, "Great." And they said, "It'll take some time before we get our first clients together and jobs and stuff for you, but we definitely want to go with you." And I was so happy. I was great. So I'm driving home trying to figure out my holiday budget. And then by the time I got home, I got another call from them telling me they got their first client already, and I had my first job to do.
That is a dream situation.
Totally.
That's
totally
awesome. Are you allowed to talk about those kind of jobs, or is that all NDA? And
some of it is NDA, but I can tell you some of it. Yeah.
Sure. I'd love to hear whatever you can tell.
Yeah. For the listeners, NDA is, a non-disclosure agreement. And sometimes in the music industry, you work for large corporations like 20th Century Fox or Disney. And some of those projects are confidential until they're released. They just keep everything under wraps. So, what I can say about this one is it was a project for a video game and something that's coming out in 2018. And then it will also be used for other licensing mediums, like it may be in commercials and stuff like that. So what they asked me to do was basically a full-blown epic orchestral cue. It was a 6-minute cue. Mm-hmm. And they told me when I had the interview that they needed fast turnarounds. And so when they gave me the first job, they asked me, "How long do you think it'll take to do this?" And I looked it over, and I listened to the reference track they gave me, and I thought, okay, well, they need it fast. So I said to them, "Well, how's 4 days?" And they said, the reaction was "What?" And I thought they were "That's way too long,
Yeah. You exceeded their expectations.
And as it turned out, they were "You can do this in 4 days?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so. I can do that in 4 days." And they're "Wow, well, okay. Yeah, send it to us,
They knew they found the right guy.
Yeah. So they were very curious when I sent it to them. But I sent them the track plus 30 stem files within 4 days. And I got my check within a couple weeks, which is good because they pay 60 days out,
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that made my holiday season.
So that was the most recent thing. That was this past holiday season, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Man, so you're starting 2018 off right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been working hard towards this, making a lot of things kind of gel. Now
Yeah,
it's take, you know, as you know, I mean, especially in music these days, because you have to have your hand in many pies in order to make a decent living if you do music full time.
absolutely.
And speaking of which, I was going to ask you, what are you doing with your music these days?
Man, I have so many jobs, it's not even funny. My parents are always joking with me, how many jobs do you have now, Dallas? So I'm doing a ton of teaching. I have a pretty thick roster of students that I teach guitar, piano, voice, all the main, what you would call rock band instruments. And then podcasting with my buddy Matt here. That's nice. We're starting an original project together called the LA Maybe, which will be coming out. This is early 2018. We're doing this interview. It will be coming out probably by summer.
Dallas
So,
Dwight and Matt Tolley.
Yep, and 3 other guys. So that's gonna be fun. And then
Oh,
a lot of production on my own and all sorts of stuff, man. Always staying busy.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
wow. Sounds like we've both been busy since the last time we
Both been
talked.
busy. That brings me to my next thing. What else? You said you had a bunch of things going on. What else did you have to talk about?
Well, I just visited the CBS soundstage for NCIS, the TV show,
Yeah.
and I got to spend a full day with the full crew, 7 guys that do the post-production sound and music editing.
Uh huh.
And that was like a master's degree in like music licensing. It was I mean, I was looking forward to this probably more than anything I've done in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it far exceeded my expectations when I got there. And it was amazing I watched them put together an episode. And it was day 3 of their production, which meant that they actually had the time and they could spend the time to go over every aspect of what they do in detail with me. Because the day 3 is the least stressful day for
Right.
TV production. Like day 1 is the most stressful one where they're doing a lot of creation and editing and mixing, and then day 2, they're getting some of the feedback from the director, and then day 3 they're waiting for the final notes to come back from the director. So it was just fascinating. I mean, for anybody that's interested in licensing, I'm also, as you may know, I'm also the house producer and mixer for howtolicenseyourmusic.com.
Yeah. Aaron Davison, shout out. We're gonna have
Yeah.
him on at some point as well.
Yeah, awesome. And so this NCIS information that I'm gathering up together and footage, I took some video out there and did some interviews. That's going to be going into my next project I want to talk to you about, which is the Aaron's howtolicenseyourmusic.com premium website. And it's a membership website. And he's been working on this thing. I've been working with him on it for like 2 years.
Uh huh.
So he calls it very aptly the Amazon and Netflix for the independent musician. And it's kind of a one-stop shop for anybody that wants to do anything with music licensing. And so I'll be supplying him with all kinds of content and more courses and interviews. I'll do coaching once a month with people. And so that's another kind of exciting project I'm working.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. That's an area that I know less than I'd like to, so that is intriguing to me, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area because I always felt kind of I don't know the word, kind of confused and dazed when I would ever venture into music licensing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always thought I was the only one, like that didn't quite get it. And then the more I learn about it, the more I understand why I felt that way, because it's an incredibly moving target. It's not something that's necessarily just standing there that you can study. You have to keep your finger on the pulse constantly. And like so many things in the music industry, it has no standards. There's no like when you turn in, for instance, let's say you contacted a music supervisor and they said, "Hey, Dallas, we got a TV commercial for you for this cell phone. And we need a 30-second and 15-second and 60-second cue from you. We love your track. And just put it into this Dropbox here, and then everything's good." Well, there's no standard. Like, you have to ask them, do you want 44:1:16? Do you want 48:24? Do you want
Right.
44:1:24? Do you want stems with that? If you want stems with that, what kind do you want? And every company has different specifications. So it requires somebody to really be on the ball and be in a lot of communication with the people that you're dealing with and asking lots of questions. And so once I learned all this, then I realized, oh, no wonder I felt kind of dazed and confused, because there are no standards in this industry. And that's one thing that I'm hoping someday to help kind of create, is kind of a board, maybe like a board of directors over certain aspects of the industry where we can put some standards in place.
That'd be a great idea.
Yeah, it would save a lot of grief too, because let's say you worked with company A and then you thought, oh, all companies want it this way, and then you got a job with company B and you sent them everything to them based on company A's specifications, and you could not only lose that job, but they may not want to work with you again because it's so competitive.
Yep.
You know. So yeah, that would be good. So that's so the licensing thing is just a fascinating area.
So did you kind of, I mean, I know you've always done a lot of everything, but would you say you're shifting more into kind of the compositional realm now, where you're writing, string parts and orchestration and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I would say that, yeah, I'm shifting more into that, and at the same time, I've been shifting more into something that I've always done, but I've been doing it intensely recently, which is mentoring, and teaching. And I've been having some incredible successes with students. I have students that are, just last week I had like students that landed some major placements for licensing. So I think those two things are the areas that I'm concentrating on a lot now.
Okay, gotcha. So speaking on the composition thing, what is your musical background as far as, writing? Did you grow up playing drums? Did you go to school? Like, what is that for you?
I grew up as a drum prodigy. So at like 8 years old, I started, playing on the pots and pans in the basement. And then my mom and somebody at school, one of the music teachers at school, kind of identified that I was more of like a drummer prodigy. And they hooked me up with a private teacher at a young age. And I started out doing that. And when I was 10, I built my first home studio. And this is back in the days when there weren't hardly any home studios.
That's insane.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. And so I put the home studio together. And then at that point, I started playing mallet instruments, percussion instruments like vibraphone and xylophone and marimba.
Right.
And then that switched over to playing piano. So, and then I was kind of self-taught on piano for a while. And then later on went to high school and started to study more music theory. And then I got a music scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago. And there I studied composition, conducting, performance, continued to play percussion in orchestras and bands, and played drums in jazz bands and rock bands. I mean, I've been playing drums as my main instrument growing up, in all kinds of bands, from orchestras to funk bands to heavy metal to rock.
Do you still play out at all, or do you still play with any bands or record tracks or anything?
I do play out once in a while. I spend most of my time in the studio now, but once in a while I play, mostly when like somebody will call me up and ask me to fill in, for a band here or there. I played for one of my students belonged to a church, and their drummer didn't show up, and he asked if I could, go in recently, and I said, yeah. And I showed up, and you never know like what a church gig is going to be like. It could be anything from one other person on stage and 3 people in the audience to some mega church, you don't know.
Oh yeah.
So I ended up playing with this band that was on stage for this church, and the bass player played with Stevie Wonder, and it was just filled with these like monster players, and that was a blast.
Yeah, it's always fun to play with, high caliber people. It's a blast.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it's important for people in the studio to keep their hand in either playing or running sound live as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because it keeps the spirit of what you're doing alive in the studio.
Right. I think this next question may answer itself with, I mean, given what you do with your production and stuff, but do you prefer studio over live playing? And what do you see are kind of the differences and similarities and comparisons between the two?
That's a really good question. It's very close. Like it's a 50-50 for me. Probably now it's 51 studio, 49 live.
There you go. Nice.
Tight race.
And the thing that tips the scale to studio for me is the current scene in the music industry, really leaves a lot to be desired for a musician. Like if a musician wants gigs now compared to when I was growing up, I was making a living by just playing live.
Right.
Now, if you're not a DJ and you're a musician, it's tough to make a living playing live. I mean, it's like a lot of these young kids are paying to play, the pay to play thing.
Yes. That is a sad thing to me.
Very. It used to be where the music union was alive and strong, and they would shut down a club that ever even hinted at pay to play.
Right.
They were very strong in the community. They could have a club, that would even try that. And now it's like there's nobody out there, like nobody that's backing live musicians to help them make sure that they can get like a minimum wage, So that kind of it sours the live scene,
Definitely.
And I would love, once I get more time to help young musicians and that whole scene, see if we could either bring back the union or do something about advocating for musicians so there's never pay to play and so that they're getting, rewarded for their work.
Right.
Absolutely.
What does that say about the music scene if they're not willing to pay for it? People aren't willing to pay for it.
Yeah, it's
I mean, do
it's
you
sad, it's
do you have any ideas in mind on how to go about changing that on a macro level?
The first idea is to kind of resurrect the musicians union, but to do it in a more like everything else in the digital age, things are being reinvented right now.
Right.
And I think the musicians union needs to be reinvented to cover even online things and gigs for musicians that are playing. So it could be literally an online presence, a musicians union website that you belong to, and then it would utilize people out in the field at venues protecting musicians. So that's kind of my idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. It seems like, yeah, like you're saying, like if you're just a musician, it can be tough. But I think kind of what you said earlier, having your hand in many pots it seems to be the solution, at least right now, for the short-term musician. Instead of just throwing your hands up in the air and saying, oh, I can't do it. It's like, well, you could do what Gary Gray's doing and, make it happen for yourself. There's lots of ways to make it happen.
Yeah, and so that leads us into how do you do that, and that would be basically educating yourself in more than one area. Like getting your music theory chops down cold. So many people I hear are saying like, I don't want to learn music theory. It's just going to box me in. It's just limiting.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite one.
Yeah, you're a teacher, so you know.
Yeah, there's someone told me when I was talking to them, it's like knowing more can never hurt you. Like I don't think that's a thing.
It's crazy, It's music being an invisible subjective art form, it lays itself wide open to opinion and quote authority. And so when somebody that you respect or that you feel has more experience than you tells you something about music, that takes a lot of responsibility to make a statement to someone, in an authoritative way or as a mentor or as a teacher. And so when someone makes a statement and they're a teacher or they're respected, what they say holds a huge weight, and it holds more weight in the music industry than any other industry because it's an invisible subjective art form. So you can inject into an invisible subjective art form an opinion that will stick for life with somebody because it's just subjective. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was like, one of my mentors is Quincy Jones, and we've actually become friends. And I have to pinch myself. It's amazing that happened.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, and so prior to meeting him and becoming having him become like a mentor to me, prior to that, I spent 2 years in a studio in Springs Theater. It's called Springs Theater Studio in Tampa, Florida. And inch for inch, it's almost exactly the same setup as Abbey Road in London.
Wow.
And so I call it the Abbey Road of America. That's how we promoted it. And so it had one of the largest microphone collections in the world, and it had all kind of analog and digital gear. And the owner there, who's an amazing person, John Steffen, he was a mentor to me for a while too. He allowed me for 2 years, 7 days a week, to just do a research project that I wanted to do, which was to find out the exact similarities and differences between digital and analog recording.
Right.
So I did that, and I found some incredible things. And one of the things I found was that I wanted to resolve this thing. You've heard people say, hey, if you want a great drum sound, you got to get analog. You got to use analog gear. You got to do it on tape. You'll never get the same sound on digital that you do on analog, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, all right, well, I'm a drummer, so I'm going to find out if that's true. And I've done a lot of studio gigs. And so I'm a producer. I'm an engineer. Let me see if this is... Let me get to the bottom of this. That's what I love to do. I'm like a researcher from hell. So I get to the bottom of it. It took me like 6 months of just researching that one thing, analog versus digital drums. So I find at the end of my research, this is what I find. That not only can you get just as good a sound on digital than you can on analog, but you can get better drum sounds on digital than analog.
How so?
So that's the result of my finding, right?
Right.
I'm not asking anybody to agree with me. I'm just saying that's the result of my research.
Right. How did you find that to be true? Just a quick rundown.
I would do, what I call checkerboard A-Bing and blind tests, because it's the only way to factually present. Oh yeah. Any comparisons. So I would make recordings, and then I'd splice them randomly together, and they'd be like digital to analog, digital analog, digital analog, and then I would have them played back on analog, systems like even vinyl records, and I'd have them played back on digital systems, so that there was no way somebody could say, "Oh, you're not doing a properly scientific experiment here."
Right.
So I use scientific, approaches to this whole thing, and I would play these randomly spliced recordings for people that were in the industry, like engineers, producers, and I would ask them things like this. I would say, hey, can you listen to this track right here and just listen to the drums? Tell me what you think about the drum production. And I didn't tell them that I spliced it all together, and they would tell me things like, oh, the drums are too wet, you have too much reverb, or the drums are too dry, there's not enough reverb, or the drums are too loud, or the drums are too soft. They'd say whatever they did, but they never said to me, hey, did you splice something together here? It sounds like it went from analog to digital to analog.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Exactly.
So to answer your question, that's how I did my research.
Yeah. That's a fascinating thing, too, because so many people, particularly old school guys, have a real strong view on that. I mean, I guess it's based on their opinions and experiences, but no real basics and facts.
No. There's so much emotion and
exactly.
Music production is a mental sport. That's the bottom line of what I've learned. It's a mental sport. And part of that is because, and I have this on my online courses and stuff, but you have a mental mixing board. Everybody has this mixing board in their mind. And if I give you a track and I say, hey, Dallas, listen to this track, okay? And then you listen to it and I go, now listen, here's the same track, but on this one I turn the bass up. Tell me which one you like more. So you listen to the second track, and then you say, well, I like the second one. I like the bass louder like that. And you will hear it louder, even though both recordings I gave you were the exact same recording.
Right.
What's in your
But
head?
because I said something to you, it creates a mental adjustment in your mind. Like, you actually hear the bass louder. You don't think it's louder. It doesn't sound the same and you think it's louder. It sounds louder in your mind. That's how strong the mind is.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. Fascinating.
So when you get these guys telling you things like the drums sound better on tape, you know, if they say it with enough authority, the drums will sound better on tape, even if they don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Full circle. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. Especially
So
as
it's
an
dangerous.
upcoming producer, you hear these things from sources that you look up to, like you said. And so that becomes your new law.
Exactly. And so I teach my students how to objectively listen to their own mixes and other mixes so that they don't get tripped up mentally by people telling them things. And I have this whole curriculum of music production ear training. And it creates an incredible stable confidence in the person that's learning these techniques, so that you just can't shake them. You could tell them anything you want and they'll either hear it or they won't, but they won't go with you just because of what you said.
Right. Objectively listening. Absolutely. That might be the most valuable audio production course ever.
I think it is, and
Yeah.
and I've been teaching my private students that, but I'm actually putting together all these examples for ear training right now. So I'm
Sure.
excited about releasing that one.
Yeah, you can debate compressors and EQs all day, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's all reaching your ears. So kind of got to start there.
Exactly. And so to take this full circle, I was being mentored by Quincy Jones, and one day he said to me, I was at his house, in his home studio. I mean, that's a pretty elaborate home studio.
I can imagine.
And so I was there, and he was like 6 inches from my face and putting his finger on my nose and going, "Gary, you want a good drum sound? You got to do it on tape. None of this digital computer crap. You do it on tape. You hear me?" And so I thought back to when my mom taught me when I was a kid. She said, "Hey, if you ever feel kind of like in an uncomfortable situation, just smile and nod."
I use that all the time. It works incredibly.
So I looked at Quincy and I just smiled and I nodded, and I never agreed with him because I totally disagree with him.
Well, like you said, for him, that's true, because it's almost an individualistic thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's the king when it comes to arranging and writing and recording, but as an engineer, he's been told things by engineers,
Right.
And so where I spent, 6 months researching, and so he could be right and I could be wrong, but all I know is what I know. I know what I know. I know what I did when I researched, and I found out that if I listened to him, if I hadn't done my research, I'd probably be bankrupt right now, because I would have said, "Oh my God, Quincy Jones, 6 inches from my face, told me that I got to go record drums on tape and with analog gear if I want good sounds." So I would be going around to studios right now, and they cost like, $250 an hour for 24 tracks sometimes, and you have to buy the tape, and it used to be $80 a box. Probably now they're like, I don't know, $250 a box to buy your tape.
Yeah.
I'd be bankrupt right now trying to do that.
Yeah.
And not only that, the drums wouldn't sound the best they could. That's, to me, I found out that's false. So
Right.
that's the power of research.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to share with your listeners is, if you're into music, do your own research and find out for sure. And don't listen to,
Absolutely.
peer pressure or to authorities without finding out for yourself.
Sure. Well, I mean, is there even right and wrong in music? It's just, I don't think so personally. I think it's, there's both. They both coexist, analog and digital. It's not an either or mutually exclusive kind of deal.
Right.
So when you want analog, do analog, or,
Yeah, if that's what you want, do it. And I say, there's one right that's universal in music, which is if it sounds good, it is good. And that's
Absolutely.
from Duke Ellington. That's his theory of music.
Right. Love it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back a little bit. We were talking about how you came up as a drummer and stuff. What was the shift into the fascination with production? I know you said you had your studio at age 10. I wish I had mine at age 10. I did not. But what was that switch that clicked where you were like, you know what? I want to record my own stuff.
Well, it started almost right away. Like I said, I started drums at 8, and then at 10, I put together my studio. And so almost immediately, the shift took place. Like, in other words, I started playing, drums, and then within a few months, probably at age 9, I wanted to be a producer. Like, my guru, or the legend that I just wanted to follow more than anyone else at that time, was George Martin with the Beatles. And he was the Beatles producer, and he was just creating just incredible sounds on those recordings. And so, to answer your question, what I was doing was the shift happened when I was listening to these 45 records. Back in the day, I'd wear them out so you could see through them. I'd play them like 1,000 times over and over, and I would listen to all the elements in those tracks. And I'm like, I want to do this, man. This stuff is amazing. I'm getting goosebumps. I want to put recordings together that give people goosebumps. So that's when it really happened, to be honest with you. And then it was just a matter of learning as I went, as I got older.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Speaking of incredible stories, actually, I would love it if you would tell the Quincy Jones story, how you met him, because that ties into the next topic I wanted to talk about, which was networking, beautifully.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, because my motto is, I'm either networking or not working.
Exactly. And you told me the phrase, the smiling bulldog, which I still think about almost daily.
Oh, you have a good memory. So, yeah, the story goes like this, is that I was managing a blind musician, and so I had to go to this gig with this blind musician at a multimillionaire's house in Beverly Hills. And so I was off to the side in the shadows, and I was just making sure everything was going good on this gig. And so my clients had to just play piano. That's all you had to do. And the multimillionaire who owned the home where this event was happening he also owned a major basketball team. He was the previous owner. I don't think he owns it anymore, but he was the previous owner of the Golden State Warriors.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So, and I'm not really huge on basketball. I'm more like, I grew up more in football, but
yeah,
so
same, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't follow basketball totally, but there were all these basketball stars at this party, because there's my neck was sore by the end of the night, And so at the end of the gig, I was walking over to help my client, to get him to, help pack up and get out. And this girl walks by, and she just says the word to somebody else she was talking to. She just says the word Quincy. That's all I heard. Like, you hear mumble, 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 Quincy. And I thought to myself, well, my dad taught me when I was a kid, you never know unless you ask. He goes, and if you want to know, just ask. And so I walked up to her, and I tapped her on the shoulder, and politely I said, excuse me. She goes, yes. And I said, I heard you say the word Quincy. Are you talking about Quincy Jones? And she goes, yes, I am, actually. And then I asked the next question. I said, because I wondered, why would she say his name out of nowhere? So I said, is Quincy Jones here? And she said, well, he is, actually, yes. And I said, can I ask you where he is? Like, where is he? And she points 5 feet away. He was actually at this table about 4 feet from me the whole night, but his back was to me. And so then I asked her the next question. I was like, no way. I was saying to myself, oh my God, this is a major opportunity. And I said to her, can you introduce me to Quincy? Would that be okay? She goes, absolutely. And I was like, I couldn't believe she said that. I thought she'd say, no, yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she says, absolutely, come with me, come over here. And she takes me there, and she pretty much interrupts Quincy, nicely. She was a really nice person. And she was very polite about it all, but she said, Quincy, I want you to meet. Here's the manager of the artist here tonight. This is Gary Gray. And he is an amazing person. I'm a stranger that's kind of almost butting in on his party thing here. And he's talking to one of the richest women from I think it was from China at the time, and he was doing some like multi-million-dollar deal with her. I found out later for licensing while they were here. And the reason he was there, by the way, so this home belonged to the owner of the Golden State Warriors, and Quincy was his neighbor. Quincy actually lived next door, which was like, you know, a 20-minute walk away. But anyway, he was like next door, you know. And he came over because he was invited to his neighbor's party. So anyway, he looked at me, and I thought he would say, "Oh, well, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm so glad to meet you," and carry on with his stuff. And he looks at me, and right away, you understand why this guy is like the king of producers on the planet. That guy has so much care and love and warmth connected with him. It's unreal. So he says to me, "Gary, huh?" He goes, "Have a seat here. Let's talk." So we start talking, and a half hour later, like, people are leaving this place, and we're still talking. So it was just an amazing experience to feel that care and that love from this guy, you know? It was
Absolutely.
amazing.
I gotta ask, what did you talk about with Quincy Jones that night?
Well, you know, it turned out that one of the reasons that we got along was that we had this common goal, which was to turn around this whole free, like, you know, the it's like this piracy is basically how I could summarize it. We were both very strongly against piracy. And so we talked about piracy and how we wanted to get rid of it. And we ended up actually working on a project together, which I can't tell you much about right now, but you'll find out about later. And so we just hit it off right there on that one subject. We just, for some reason, I started talking about piracy and how much I was against it. And he just like was like locked in and focused on that conversation. It was amazing.
So could you talk a little bit about your views and ideas on piracy?
Absolutely. One of the sad things about the industry now is that the younger generation, when they got onto the internet with music, they consider that music is like without value. And this is not everybody, but there's enough people that spread this. And the truth is, there's only a few people that spread this. That's what I've learned. There's only a few bad apples, but they spread this so wide that some people take on this kind of viewpoint just kind of by osmosis. And it's a real evil thing, you know, where they will push the fact that music should be free, that songwriters shouldn't get compensated. It goes back to this thing we talked about earlier, how musicians pay to play, you know, which is worse than piracy. It's like paying somebody for something you should be paid for.
Right.
It's like double piracy.
Making negative money.
Yeah. So my view on piracy is that it's kind of fascinating. We have the technology around us is growing like logarithmically as we move through the future. And at the same time, while technology is moving up, morality and ethics and morals are moving down. And that's a dangerous society to live in. So that's what he and I talked about. You know, I said that to him, and he goes, "Brother," he goes, "pull your chair up closer here. Let's talk." And so that's what we talked about. We talked about this gap, this widening gap between technology and morals and ethics, and how it needs to close. That gap needs to close so that ethics and morals comes up and meets the advance of technology.
Yeah. Struck common ground with them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a heavy subject for sure.
Yeah, and it's too bad. I mean, I think overall there seems to be a bit of an improvement in a way.
I've noticed that too.
Yeah. What do you think about piracy?
I do not like it. Obviously, I mean, I'm definitely with you guys. It seems evil is a good word that you just used to put zero value on something that costs so much money and so much time and takes so much of someone's soul to release into the world, and then just be like, it's free, it's worthless. I'll stream it on, wherever. It's like, yeah, I don't like that at all. And I do think we may be on the up with my limited knowledge of that subject, but I hope so, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen all the latest statistics, but a few months ago I started looking at it, and it seemed like there were some improvements being made overall. So hopefully that's, something that, I mean, talk about trying to change something. That's a huge monster to tackle.
Exactly. Well, do you view the streaming services, maybe excluding Spotify because they're notoriously the worst, as a step in the right direction?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. Very interesting that you asked that, because I got into a conversation with Quincy about that too, and he said to me, I kind of learned a lot on this. He said, man, streaming is good. And I said, well, how does that relate to piracy and stuff? And he said, look, he goes, streaming is radio, right? It's like the modern radio. And I was like, yeah, it is. It's like the modern radio. He said, you know how much radio pays musicians? I said, no. He goes, zero. And it always has paid zero.
That's a really good point.
It was a promotional platform. It was a promotional platform for music so that they could sell records. And he goes, yeah, it's true that the record sales are going down and everything. He goes, but to rag on and diss streaming, he goes, I don't think that's the right way to go. He goes, no, he goes, they're actually paying, even though it's very small.
Right.
And they're planning on paying more as time goes on.
Sure. It's a step in the right direction. Exactly.
So he's saying, for all the people that are complaining about it, he said, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's let this baby grow. And it looks like it's going to grow into a positive thing. Don't kill it now in its infancy, because that's his opinion. And I haven't researched it enough to even talk about it with any, I can't talk about it with confidence because I don't know enough about it. And I'll be the first one to tell you that. But what he said seemed to make sense to me. So now I have at least a viewpoint to check out when I go and research it.
Well, as a consumer, are you a member of any of those sites?
Yeah, like Pandora and Spotify, but I have the one where it's just a freemium,
Right.
And that's only because, the only reason is because when I want to listen to a piece of music, that's not my preferred place to go. What I do is I go to iTunes and I buy it. And that's just my own integrity. I buy it.
Right. Yeah.
And oftentimes one of the reasons why I buy it is I convert it to a WAV file and bring it up into my session for reference files.
It's a great idea.
So, so I feel good about that. I feel good about backing up musicians that way by continuing to actually buy their music.
Right. That kind of makes me think of another question I wanted to ask you. As listening to music as a consumer versus listening to music with a producer's ear, are you able to turn that off and just sometimes sit back and enjoy music, or is it hard for you to do that, or how does that work for you?
That's probably the most important and far-reaching question that anybody's asked me in the last year. It's the smartest question anyone's ever asked me in the last year. And when I teach my students how to produce, the most challenging thing to achieve with a student, in my viewpoint, is how to teach them how to listen to music with Iowa ears. We call it Iowa ears. And what that means is like some farmer in Iowa who doesn't know anything about music theory,
right,
and doesn't even know enough about music itself to even say anything about why he likes something or doesn't. But he can definitely tell you with a strong opinion that he likes something or he doesn't. And he's not listening to anything at all. No detail except the entire song. He doesn't even know what he's listening to. He just knows, like he doesn't even know that a guitar is a guitar, or a drum is a, you know what I'm saying? So it's the exact opposite of a producer or musician. And those are the most valuable ears in the world. So what you asked is like the golden, like $64,000 question. And that is, if you don't develop an ability to listen with Iowa ears, as I call it, as a consumer, then good luck. Like, that's the first thing you need to stop what you're doing and just learn how to do that before you take another step. So that's what I teach. I teach my students more than anything else how to listen to their music as a listener, and throw away everything. Right. Throw away everything as a producer, engineer, drummer, whatever you are. Throw it away and just listen to that thing with your emotion, because that's what listeners listen to. They don't listen to it with their ear or their mind. They listen to it with their heart, with emotion. How is it emotionally moving you, or is it emotionally moving you? And so, yeah, that's my answer to you. And I think, my hat's off to you, Dallas, for asking that question, because that's the smartest question you could ask.
Well, thank you.
Great answer.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm with you. I think more people should learn how to do that, especially as a producer. You can get so hung up in the details and the weeds, and what inversion should I play this chord in? You're missing the point. Like, step back, use your Iowa ears, as Gary Gray says. I love that, by the way. I'm going to be using that often. Yeah, that's great. Can we shift gears a little bit and talk about networking? I feel like that's an area that you have a lot of expertise in, and that a lot of musicians have no expertise in. And I would love it if you could share some of your tips and knowledge and anything you might say on that topic.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm putting together a new course right now, actually, that's going to be out around June. And I just I was commissioned to do this course. So somebody's actually paying me to do this course. And so I can't say any details about it until June, but I can tell you some of the content within it. And one of the things has to do with networking. And so I'll tell you this much. I just finished writing, there's a book that goes along with it. So I just finished this chapter. So it's perfect timing as it's fresh in my mind. Networking is fascinating because how there's certain people that tell you, well, I'm not a people person, and so I'm uncomfortable networking, and I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not sociable. I'm not this. I'm not that. And so I'm going to have trouble networking. And then there's other people who are more naturally adept at social graces, and they can get in there and they can just light up a party and light up a room. And, so you'd think that they're going to network like way better than the other person. And, to a certain degree that could be true. But when I work with students and musicians and we talk about networking, here's the bottom line on networking to me. And that is, sometimes that guy with the social personality can use that to his detriment, and it can actually hurt him when he's networking. And here's what I mean by that. If you just simply are not rude, you're polite to someone, and you are sincere, so you just, you act, just be yourself, and don't try to put on a networking hat or something. Just be yourself and be polite, and at least be able to be heard, like don't mumble. Like, speak up loud enough to be heard. And if you're polite to someone, and if you're not rude, and you're sincere, and you try to help the other person, if that's all you follow in terms of, quote, rules for networking, you'll go really, really far. I mean, I've had some students that were like wallflowers. They're just like so shy. And now they're networking like crazy. I mean, this one girl is just got her first major motion picture soundtrack. Very, very talented composer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer now. And I've been working with her. And then we started working on her networking. So her career was going nowhere after we taught her all this stuff, mixing, mastering, composition. She was making incredible recordings, but career going nowhere. So then we focused on networking. And I just told her, I said, it's just the number of people that you speak to, primarily and hopefully face to face. And so here comes, here comes a really important aspect of networking, like where you network. So I wish I could say that you know that. Well, put it this way. Look, I somehow met Quincy Jones. He became a mentor and a friend, but I live, in the LA area. So had I not lived in the LA area, that never would have happened. So the point I'm getting at is the quality of your results do have something to do with where you are networking.
Right.
And the first thing I'll say is, if you network face to face, that's the best kind of networking there is, by far. So if you don't live in LA or New York or Nashville or London, I strongly suggest, because I'm talking hopefully to people that are serious about networking, not just people that want to move up in their career or get to the next level, but I mean people that want to succeed on an A-list level. I would say to those people, at least visit music meccas. The meccas are Los Angeles, as I said, Nashville, New York, London. Get to those meccas, get there, go there, and network and just talk to people. And it's the number of people you talk to. It doesn't even matter the quality of people you talk to. Like, check this out, Dallas. If you went to Nashville and you wanted to do some really effective networking, just start right away and network with as many people as possible. Like, you go into CVS and you're going to buy razor, network. There's some guy in the aisle. Say hi. Hey, my name is Gary Gray and I'm a producer. You may have nothing to do with the music industry. Like, more often than not, you'll hear people go, "Oh, my cousin's a blah," or "That's weird because I'm a this and I'm a that." Or
right.
They may say to you, "I don't know anything about music and I'm not connected with anybody with music." But then they go home and you gave them your card and they give it to their cousin who they forgot about when they were talking to you.
Right.
So to me, every live human being is a networking opportunity. Everyone. I'm not kidding. And so, the great thing about it is if you approach it that way, you'll get better and better and better because you're doing a lot of practicing as far as your network.
Right. Well, it's like they say in sales, if you have, a 1% conversion rate, you want to make that first number as big as you can. So that 1% is a bigger number. If you talk to two people, you're not going to get anywhere, Talk to 200, you might have two.
Exactly.
That really are life-changing, Like, for example, you and Quincy Jones is probably the best networking example ever.
Yeah, and remember the person I talked to was some girl.
Exactly.
Who was mumbling in my ears because of all the, the party noise.
Yep.
Just some girl who said one word. That was who it was, and I could have just let that go.
Well, I wanted you to tell that story again because it's such a good networking example. It's also a great example of what your dad taught you, If you don't know, ask. And sometimes people are scared to ask or, don't want to look stupid or anything, but I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and that brings us to the other thing you mentioned, which is the smiling bulldog. It's like, that's the way I describe, somebody asked me one time, so what is your successful action for networking? Like, how do you do it? I know what you do now. Now, how do you do it? And then I thought and I go, well, I do it like a smiling bulldog. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, if you see this little dog down there and it's nipping at your pant leg and it won't let go, like a bulldog won't let go, but it's so cute and it's like it's in a good mood. You can see it's in a good mood, and you just want to pet it. You want to pick it up and pet it and talk to it, Right. And so you have to be persistent. That's the bulldog, but you have to be smiling, and that's where manners comes in. You have to have good manners and be positive. Be very positive.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's amazing advice for anyone listening. Shifting gears once more, I'd love to talk a little bit about some abstract stuff like creativity and inspiration. You do so much work, music is your job. How do you stay creative when the clock's on? How do you stay creative in those 4 days it took to turn around that cue for, 21 Century?
I follow a philosophy that kind of goes like this, is that there is no writer's block. That doesn't exist. Like, people create writer's block, and how they do it, and this is kind of my philosophy. This is how they create writer's block, which doesn't even exist. Is they go into their studio or into their writing room or at their piano or wherever they are to do their creative work, and they sit there. That's how you create writer's block. Here's how you get rid of writer's block, which doesn't even exist. Let's say you're at your piano and you have to write a song and you're writing it on the piano. Well, if you sit there and you put your finger on a key and hit the key, writer's block is gone. It's that simple. It's like action dissolves writer's block.
Right.
So I never have writer's block, and here's how I never have it. And it's worked for everybody I've shown this to, is that I'm always in action. I don't sit there and think. Like I think Quincy said one time, people can get into paralysis from analysis. And so you can even start analyzing your writer's block. I see people do that. That's like creating double writer's block.
Yeah. Very productive.
And I don't want to lessen that I don't want to lessen that problem for people, but that problem itself to me is a joke. It's like it's move your fingers, or if you're at the computer, move your mouse, or if you're at your drums, hit your drums. Like whatever your creative activity is, you can totally like nuke and destroy writer's block by just, it sounds so simple, it sounds so stupid, but it's powerful by going into action.
Right. If you can't write.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love it. So what about creativity? How would you say stay creative, keep doing fresh ideas, not staying bored, if you will?
That comes from knowing music theory. Because knowing music theory, I know that music theory to me is this. This is how I summarize the definition of music theory. It's a collection of observations based on things that give you chills.
I love it. I always say it's the why and how of music.
Yeah. And to me, the reason it became the why and how is it's because it's a collection of observations based on things that give you chills. So when they say this voicing is a good choice to make instead of that voicing, why is it? Why? It's because that voicing can give you chills more than that one can.
Right.
See what I'm saying? It was based on emotional responses of people in music. So when I explain music theory that way to people, they are always interested in learning about it. And that's how I stay creative. I stay creative by keeping sharp on my music theory skills, because then I could take any one of those tools in my mind. I could say, okay, let's see, counterpoint. Counterpoint is a subject that's hardly even taught anymore.
It is rare. Yep.
How to write more than one melody at a time on top of each other.
Yep. John Williams.
Yeah. So if you learn counterpoint, to me, you'll always feel creative. You know all the rules of counterpoint. You could sit there at any moment and just create chills out of thin air.
Yeah. Powerful. Music is extremely powerful. And that's probably why I love it so much. I'm sure that's why you love it so much.
Oh, yeah.
Man, so much good stuff. If someone wanted to learn more theory, what would you suggest? Where do you start?
There's a guy that I've been talking to over the last year and a half. His name is Steve McGlynn. And it looks like Muglin, Mugglin.
Okay.
But him and his dad are always telling me, like, it's McGlynn. I guess they're Irish,
Gotcha.
And because I discovered them just online with this website called McGlynnWorks, or MugglinWorks, if you want to say it that way. So it's MugglinWorks.com. So I take all my students through this, and these guys, to me, are like the modern day, I don't know, like they're modern day Socrates. He's one of the most brilliant and genius educators that I've ever met, because he's taken music theory and he's put it together, and he's created these, well, here's one thing that he created, like these maps. They call them maps, chord maps. And then he went and created an app for an iPad called the Chord Maps. I think they're called mini chord maps. And they're just, oh my God. This stuff is like, it takes theory, and what I do is I take people through these courses that he have. They're actually very easy to do, believe it or not. And then you use this app, and then you use this chord map that you can put on your wall, and you can follow it. And once you get that under your belt, then I teach my students like counterpoint and fugue, like heavy theory, like very advanced theory.
Yeah.
But this is like the missing bridge I found, which is so if somebody doesn't want to go into the heavy stuff, I still take them through McGlynnWorks.com, and just an amazing approach to music theory.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, so I heard you were a part of the Grammy Recording Academy. You were a voting member. How did you come across something like that, a great opportunity like that?
I had some people in the industry that suggested that I do it, and I was like, well, how do I do it? And you have to go through this. It's like a vetting process where you basically have to submit all these different categories of things that you've done in your career, and if every one of those things is checked off, then they will look at your submission, and then you get in. And so that was a very cool thing. I think
That's validation. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was about, I think, 3 years ago now.
Very
I think
cool.
it's 3 years. Yeah.
So aside from the obvious, what does that entail, or is it just voting for the Grammys?
Well, the cool thing is that you have you can go to the Grammys. You know.
Oh, there you go.
That's great.
I thought anybody can go to the Grammys. Well, you have to be either nominated or a member, of the Academy.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's a cool thing.
So
and then
you went, I assume, and I hope.
well,
Right?
the funny thing is the last 3 years when there's a day that the tickets come out for sale,
Mm-hmm.
and they're usually gone by the end of the day. But I was ready to get them, and almost in the same hour that they were out, all 3 years, I got like major clients that day.
There you go. That's not all bad.
Networking.
So it was kind of a good problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much, Gary, for being on the podcast, man. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, excellent.
I wanted to ask you, where can our listeners find your stuff?
Well, you can go to GaryGrayProductions.com and learnaudioengineering.net. And then my new website, which is it's a company that I've started about a year ago, and we're going to be releasing a revolutionary line of plugins.
Oh, nice.
At the end of 2018, and that's called SimpleWisdomAudio.com.
Great name. I love that.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Gary Gray, and we appreciate you coming on. Always a good friend of the Musicians Talk Show, and you're welcome back anytime, my man. Hey guys! First of all, thank you so much for listening. If you could please take a quick moment to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating and review. Your feedback seriously is really important, and it helps us keep the show alive.
Check out musicianstalkshow.com to sign up for our mailing list. If you do, we're going to send you our main theme song and a few other surprises. Plus, you'll always be the first to know what episodes are coming up.
If you want to help support the show so we can keep putting out the highest quality content possible, please follow the Support the Show link at our website and consider donating to our Patreon page.
Lastly, if you have an idea for a guest or a question you want to discuss, contact us through any of the contact forms on our website, and we'll do everything we can to make it happen.
Whew, all right, that was a lot, but we got through it. Thanks again, guys, and we will see you soon.